Welcome back to the Pursue Peace 2022 Convention CRINGEATHON, where we continue to take a look at the Jehovah's Witnesses 3-day convention program all 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses are expected to watch and pay attention to. The convention starts with this song reminding Jehovah's Witnesses to never give up pursuing a paradise that will never come. Then we get stock footage of these cute kids and baby animals, and another musical segment showing people being Jehovah's Witnesses, reminding them what they have sacrificed and what they have to sacrifice every day. But then we get to our first symposium, which is the laziest way of filling up a program, I think. Just pick one topic and select multiple speakers to extrapolate a whole bunch of made-up beliefs and show up a video repeating what they just said. Don't believe me? Stick around, because this is one of the symposiums with the most amount of non-biblical teachings jammed on top of a few out-of-context verses I have ever seen. Normally, I would be pretty bored already. However, the first speaker happens to be one of the best/worst speakers in the Jehovah's Witness religion, Kenneth Flodin. Let's see how long we have to wait this time for Ken to say something weird.
This symposium is about sharing the good news of peace. What a privilege it is to help humble people find peace with Jehovah. At Ephesians 6:15, in describing a Christian's complete suit of armor, it mentions our feet.
That's literally how he opens his speech. Now, if you thought he actually had a point to make when highlighting the word feet, you'll be thoroughly disappointed.
So at Ephesians 6:15, he said this: having your feet shod in readiness to declare the good news of peace. Yes, ready to share the good news of peace on every suitable occasion.
Yup, turns out the verse just says, be ready. That's it. But he's not done extrapolating meaning out of the Bible.
Zealous evangelizers are eager to declare the good news. They're on fire. They want others to find peace with Jehovah. But is there something that can dampen that flame? Something that could even extinguish the eager desire, the readiness to find those who, even unknowingly, yearn for peace? Yes. It can be difficult to remain eager with fiery zeal when we face such problems as an unresponsive territory, criticism, or outright opposition to the work. And then there are the pressures of daily life. Those issues can also be likened to a fire, to destructive fires, like the wildfires that have plagued the western part of the United States year after year. Those problems can threaten our zeal and enthusiasm. So what can we do? Well, there's an English expression that originates with firefighters. The expression is to fight fire with fire.
Yes, isn't it so lucky that we have a saying that fits in perfectly with Ken's narrative? Ken here is telling Jehovah's Witnesses that when they feel like their Jehovah's Witness responsibilities are too overwhelming, the answer is to double down. Because did you know fighting fire with fire is sort of in the Bible if you make it fit?
Look at 1 Timothy 4:16 with me. It says, pay constant attention to yourself and to your teaching. You see, the flame, the temperature. Pay attention to your zeal in teaching. It says, persevere in these things, for by doing this you'll save both yourself and those who listen to you. Yes, share the good news of peace with zeal.
But now, let's check out the video portion of Kenneth's talk.
I don't remember when our routine service day became so, well, routine. Our zeal wasn't what it used to be.
This This accurately portrays the sad existence of Jehovah's Witnesses. It's very easy to just follow through the motions and get both overwhelmed because of all of the stuff you need to do as a witness and bored because nothing you need to do as a witness is ever fun. Preaching is especially difficult since it's just experiencing rejection door after door. And the governing body is here to tell Jehovah's Witnesses that if they feel like that, it's their fault.
And we were finally starting to notice. Not everyone wants to listen. We just didn't want to be the reason. It didn't take much research to find great ideas and set a few simple goals. Like working with those who encourage us. With Ryota and Ami, we're always talking about how we can reach the heart. We got back to basics. Be friendly. Listen. Let the conversation progress naturally. Try to share an appealing scriptural thought. And keep trying. Our zeal can attract an honest person to the truth.
The advice for Jehovah's Witnesses is always the same. When feeling down, double down. You're tired of being rejected in the door-to-door ministry? Then do some homework so you can fix that.
Next, keep your ministry fresh. Well, what does that mean? Instead of having a number of phone calls that go unanswered, which is similar to having no one at home when in the door-to-door work, change the time of day for witnessing when more people are home. Participate in various forms of the ministry. And ironically, the pandemic more or less forced some of us who were staunch door-to-door witnesses to branch out. We tried phone witnessing, letter writing, and now we have a variety of preaching activities, and this can keep us more fully engaged and enthused.
I love how Kenneth here says how the pandemic forced some of us who were staunch out door-to-door witnesses to branch out, as if before the pandemic you could just spend a few hours just writing letters to no one and report that as preaching. Despite Ken's best efforts to enthuse his followers into preaching, he unfortunately lacks any Bible basis to say Jehovah's Witnesses should be preaching the way they do. But, as we're about to see, there's a ton to learn out of what the Bible doesn't say.
Hebrews 6:10. You familiar with that? Of course you are. But it does not say, Jehovah does not forget the number of return visits you make. It does not say, he does not forget how many Bible studies you conduct. No, it says he does not forget your work, your effort, and the love you showed for his name.
Seriously, this is just a speech talking about doctrines that are not in the Bible. Let's move on to a man who I like to describe as the most entertainingly boring man in the world.
What would you think and how would you feel if I showed up to give this talk but had done nothing to prepare what to say to you? I had not bothered to study the outline I was given, could not remember the theme, had no idea what the main points are, and would have to guess at what scriptures to use to support them. And then as I spoke, I would ramble incoherently and make a very bad impression.
I'd say you were about to spoil the next speaker. But let's see how that ties into Jehovah's Witnesses need to preach.
Can you see where I'm going with this? Could the same things be said if you engaged in the ministry without first preparing what to say? You did not review the sample conversations that had been provided, could not think of how to start a conversation, and did not know what scripture to share. How nervous would you be? And what would the householder think of you? It would likely be a very short, uncomfortable conversation, and the other person may not care to have you call again.
Oh, you mean unlike all those other times when you preach to someone and they listen and you have a great spiritual conversation with them. Using their own numbers, you can see how many hours of preaching are needed per convert. And the number gets worse when you realize most converts are children of parents who are already in the religion and not people the Jehovah's Witnesses found door to door. But again, if you're not finding recruits, it's your own fault. And Robert's here to tell you what you need to do to fix it.
Jesus helped his disciples to prepare for the ministry. Luke chapter 10 reports that before sending out 70 disciples to preach, he shared with them a pleasant way to greet each householder, told them what to talk about, the kingdom of God, and he told them how to respond to the varied reactions they would get in their territory. As a result, because the disciples were fully prepared for the ministry, they enjoyed some thrilling experiences.
Luke chapter 10 is the closest the Jehovah's Witnesses have to a biblical backing to justify their way of preaching. The first verse is often cited as the reason why you see Jehovah's Witnesses go door to door in pairs, because you see, Jesus sent his preachers in pairs. But that's where the similarities end. Jesus very clearly sent a fixed amount of men to go to towns and ask to stay in someone's home, eating and drinking whatever the hospitality of the host moved them to give them. And then they were to heal the sick and use the miracles to prove that the kingdom of God was near. Once the men are done, they go back to Jesus and they excitedly tell them about the impromptu exorcisms that they performed. Not only do Jehovah's Witnesses fail at performing any kind of miracles, but Jesus himself didn't tell the men to go to other places again. This is just a story of Jesus giving 72 men some superpowers so they can be their hype men and help Jesus spread the message more effectively than one time. But if you ask Jehovah's Witnesses, Jesus that time was helping his disciples get ready for the door-to-door ministry, and those men probably went off to become special pioneers off camera.
We'd made some good changes, but we weren't done. I asked Yuri what she planned to talk about. That started the usual scramble. And we got it, the sample conversation. That'll do. But for that to work, I had to remember the scripture. We were both a little forgetful that morning. Yeah, we needed to prepare better. We'd been relying on our experience and not enough on Jehovah. So, first, we prepared our hearts. Then, we prepared our minds. And found new ways to use our preaching tools. Even a little preparation for initial calls. And our return visits went a long way.
Isn't it great how JW.org always comes to the rescue? They're so helpful at letting you know how to do everything, down to the words that come out of your mouth. Don't rely on your own knowledge. Let Jehovah speak through you by using our publications. And if you think I'm exaggerating, just listen what Robert is about to say.
Each issue of the Christian Life and Ministry Meeting Workbook provides us with sample conversations that give us some helpful ideas. Of course, you may modify the samples or use something entirely different. Perhaps a subject from a previous month or a different scripture would have wider appeal in your territory. Your opening words may be the most important part of the presentation, so think it through. If the introduction does not arouse interest, the other person may terminate the conversation before we can give a witness. We will be more effective if we carefully prepare the first sentence or two that we will say after giving a customary greeting. We might say, "Many people are concerned about," or "I would like to get your opinion on," or say something else. then pick a topic that is of local interest and ask a well-worded viewpoint question that will draw the person into the conversation.
Robbie here is giving us a rare peek behind the curtain. He's telling Jehovah's Witnesses exactly how they're expected to perform the first visit, using their materials to prepare, because obviously the writers in the Bible forgot to talk about this bit. So what if the first visit is somehow miraculously successful? Well, Robert is also going to tell Jehovah's Witnesses exactly what to do then.
For example, on the initial call you could ask, why is there so much suffering in the world? After discussing that, raise the question, how does God feel about our suffering? But don't answer the question until your next visit. After answering that question on the first return visit, leave the person with this question. What will God do to end our suffering? To be discussed on your next visit.
Oh, the old Dan Brown cliffhanger method to get people hooked. I'd advise against this nowadays, because if the person doesn't care, then the question method won't work. And if the person does care, then they'll just Google it. And Googling anything about Jehovah's Witnesses will quickly show them for the cult they are. But if this method somehow works, Robbie is also ready to keep telling Jehovah's Witnesses what to do next.
Even if we know the material very well, we should prepare for each study session with our student in mind. That means thinking about and anticipating the views and needs of that individual. What points might he struggle to understand or accept? It also means getting familiar with the lesson to be covered in our interactive Bible course. Read the lesson carefully, look up the read scriptures to see how they apply, watch the videos that will be shown during the lesson, and review the items in the Explore section so that you will know which of those will be especially helpful to your student. Then you will be well prepared to conduct the study.
See all the preparation that Jehovah's Witnesses are expected to do just to have a chance at converting someone? The religion leaves nothing to chance, and the conversion technique is clearly a display in this speech. And Robbie is about to give us 2 final tips to improve our ministry.
Since it is God who makes the seed of truth grow in a person's heart, we should ask for Jehovah's blessing on our preparation for the study so that we can best help the student spiritually. And we will be more effective in our ministry if we stay up to date with the latest material and features found on jw.org and in JW Library. So learn how to navigate the website and the app. 2 very helpful features on the website are Bible Questions Answered under the Bible Teachings tab and Frequently Asked Questions under the About Us tab. They can also be found on the app under Article Series.
Oh yeah, were you wondering where God came into the Jehovah's Witnesses conversion technique? He's pretty much an afterthought, reduced to remember to pray before reading our materials, because again, none of this has biblical backing. But let's move on to Tony Morris, who's going to tell us all about how we need to take the initiative to preach 24/7.
For this part of the symposium, Share the Good News of Peace, we're going to discuss the need to take the initiative. Think about it. One thing about being Jehovah's Witnesses is that we're never off duty. We never stop being one of Jehovah's Witnesses, wherever we are, whatever we're doing. So it isn't just that when we're out in formal preaching work with congregation group, we are one of Jehovah's Witnesses all the time.
For anyone who isn't a Jehovah's Witness, informal preaching is basically when a witness preaches as they go about their day to strangers. Informal preaching basically puts Jehovah's Witnesses on the spot all the time, because it means they're expected to preach not only on Sunday morning, but at every waking moment. Jehovah's Witnesses rarely preach like this because it's obviously unsustainable. So these speeches serve to remind many witnesses of yet another way they can never do enough and always fall short. But Tony has a great Bible-based story of why informal preaching is something you should do at any opportunity.
Notice here in John chapter 4, we get the context that they've been traveling through Samaria. And then verse 6 will read, in fact, Jacob's well was there. Now Jesus, tired out as he was from the journey, was sitting at the well. It was about the 6th hour. Now that's interesting, is it not? See? Jesus was tired. Perfect man, but human. And his journey tired him out. And he's there about noon, sitting at the well. And now notice what happens. In verse 7, a woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, give me a drink. Real simple. Give me a drink. Well, what do we learn from this?
What do you mean? What can we learn from this? The story literally just started. Tony literally just opened up a scripture, told us the setup for the story, then read the starting dialogue, and he's already closing the Bible and asking what can you learn from it. And it sounds like I'm joking, but he's really done with the story.
As you notice, Jesus was tired. We get tired because of being imperfect. If a perfect man gets tired out, certainly we get tired. Sometimes you get feeling, well, maybe I could witness to this person, take the initiative, but I just don't feel like it. I'm tired. Not with Jesus. See, to imitate Jesus, even in the case that you're tired, you're thinking of others, and you want to take the opportunity to start a conversation.
That, again, is how much juice Jehovah's Witnesses can squeeze out of the Bible. The Bible says that Jesus approached a woman and ordered her to give him a drink, and that means Jehovah's Witnesses need to improve their informal ministry.
Now, these are the things we learn with this. He didn't make any assumptions about her, and obviously knew she was a woman and a Samaritan traveling through Samaria at that time. And he didn't refuse to speak to her because of that. So the lesson for us there is, don't judge people by what you see, based on their culture, the color of their skin. This world is filled with judges. We're Jehovah's Witnesses. We don't do that. We leave the judging to Jehovah and Jesus Christ, and don't judge whether you think they'll converse with you. That's wrong. Jesus didn't do that, and he set that perfect example for us. However, give it some thought. What if Jesus had, rather than say, give me a drink, started off with, I am the Messiah. Give me a drink. Don't know, because Jesus had Jehovah's Spirit and heavenly wisdom, and he entered the conversation first. So that's what we want to keep in mind and try to do ourselves.
So yes, Jehovah's Witnesses don't judge anyone, and what if Jesus had said things differently? Well, we don't know. Wow, thank you so much for the insight, Tony. But how can we apply these clearly biblical teachings today?
For example, you could be in the doctor's office waiting room. So you speak from your heart and you notice the person's looking at you and say, boy, I look forward to the day I'll never be sick again. Well, they could look at you and say, well, this guy's crazy. Or they could say, well, that would be nice. Or what makes you believe that's going to happen for you? Either way, you're taking the initiative to start a conversation and leave the rest to Jehovah. He's the one that gets the credit for the results.
Yeah, Jehovah takes the credit for the results, but you can sometimes take the blame when there are no results. And if you thought Tony's example of informal preaching in a doctor's office was cringe, you'll love how it looks in real action.
They seemed nice.
I knew what Yuri was thinking.
I wanted to start a conversation, but I didn't want to bother them either. And when an opportunity came, I just froze. Then I was in a rush to give a witness. It felt forced. It helped to hear that we'd all been there. Our past experiences were similar. Whenever we didn't put pressure on ourselves and just looked for something in common to talk about, we could usually find a moment when we could say something about the Bible. She was curious why we were dressed up. Turns out that she'd never talked to Jehovah's Witnesses before.
Again, this is the level of dedication you have to show as a Jehovah's Witness. You're not supposed to even take a break while you're out socializing and having some lunch. But before we're done with Tony, I want to give you a little insight into how watching this propaganda raw is like. Because sometimes they say the absolute most boring stuff right before they say the most ludicrous thing you've ever heard in your entire life.
To conclude, I think I want to share this beautiful thought when it comes to this work we're engaging in and sharing the good news of peace by taking the initiative. Never forget this, and you know it, but it's a good reminder. Revelation chapter 14. And I saw another angel flying in mid-heaven, and he had everlasting good news to declare to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation and tribe and tongue and people. Now, this is profound. Obviously, angel flying in mid-heaven, the footnote helps us where it's overhead, where the birds fly. You know, you see them and see another angel in mid-heaven. That's how close they are. And this is something you want to meditate on. Personally, when I was in the traveling work, sometimes I'd be working with one of the brothers or one of the sisters, and they had opposition in some of the territories we'd work, and I could tell they were feeling the stress, and I knew it was the reaction of some of these householders. So what I used to enjoy doing, and they appreciated after they realized what I was doing, we'd be walking along, and then I'd just stop, and I'd look up, and I'd say, "You see him?" And they're like, "Who?" He's right up there above the trees. And they'd look at me like, "Our circuit overseer's lost it." But I said, "See," and would tell them about Revelation 14:6. When we're in the preaching work, whether it's informal or out there formally door to door, the angels are the real reapers. At least one is nearby.
See why I don't call these videos rebuttals? Like, do you really need me to point out how delusional this is? The only thing I'd like to remind you of is that this man, this delusional man who just shared a story of how he continuously pretended to see angels sitting on trees, is one of the 8 people in charge of deciding how over 8 million people are supposed to live their lives.
To encourage us to promptly follow up on interests that we find in the field ministry, Paul likens our work to a plant that grows from a little seed.
This is how Gary opens his talk. He's about to talk about return visits, the visits Jehovah's Witnesses are supposed to do when/if they find anyone at all receptive during the door-to-door ministry, and try to exploit that minimum amount of attention in the hopes you can convert that person. Gary, though, has this thing about seeds that is basically what Toni Morris just did with Give Me a Drink. Just keep watching and you see what I mean.
See, regular watering is vital for a seed to sprout, to take root, and in fact, continue to grow. Now, with these facts in mind, Paul's words at 1 Corinthians chapter 3 and verse 6 shows that more is required than simply planting a seed of truth. It says, I planted, Apollos watered, but God kept making it grow. So all credit goes to Jehovah God for making the spiritual seed grow, but he allows us to have a role in the process. Did you notice the important role Apollos played? He did the watering. In a regular way, he helped keep the spiritual soil of the individual moist, never allowing it to dry out.
So Gary takes a scripture where Paul is saying, I may have planted, Apollos may have watered, but it's God who makes faith grow. And instead of taking the very obvious lesson of the verse, meaning it's God who makes faith grow, he goes like,
Did you notice the important role Apollos played? He did the watering.
And since Apollos watered, that means you also need to water the people you find in the ministry. So this means if you find anyone who seems even remotely interested when you're preaching, you go back and you do anything you can to make them wet.
Moist.
Ami left a great question for her next visit. Return visit, Mrs. Iwata. I told her I'd visit this morning. I just didn't schedule the time. I could at least stop by on the way back. Missed her again. If I didn't try something different, I was just going to keep missing her.
So this sister keeps missing the one person who happened to show any interest before. And Jehovah's Witnesses are here to tell you that if that happens, you are not supposed to take the hint.
First, I wanted her to know I hadn't forgotten her. Dear Mrs. Iwata, I hope you're doing well. I promise to come by early next week. By the way, your flowers are so beautiful. Then I made a plan for my service day. Following through is just too important to leave to chance.
Yeah, so if the person keeps dodging you, you can just leave a written message jammed into the door like a lunatic, just lightly threatening their plans. That's effective because it shows Mrs. Iwata, we're not fucking around. Let's instead get back to Gary and see how far we can take this watering thing he has going.
In our ministry, we often compliment the householder for the beautiful flowers or plants in their yard, just like the sister did in the video. But how did they get that way? Well, the householder probably watered them on set days or even used an automatic sprinkler timer to schedule regular watering cycles. See, to have healthy and vibrant plants, watering cannot be left to chance. Well, how can we apply that to our ministry? Before leaving a person that has shown interest, endeavor to set the proper time to water. The water of truth will come on. See, perhaps, what day or hour would you like for me to return to continue our discussion or to answer the question? See, this consideration really dignifies the person, allowing them to share in setting the appointment. It's important that we be willing to water an interested person at the most convenient time for them. Then, just like setting a timer, put that appointment where you'll remember it.
Gary is more afraid to let go of this dumb extrapolated verse than he is to lose a potential convert. Fortunately, he's about to give us a life hack to keep them moist.
Because of the busy lives that people have today, it may be hard to find the person at home again, even if you set an appointment. So it's a good idea to try and obtain his contact information, maybe his phone number. Some publishers anticipate this challenge and simply ask, "Do you text?" By simply texting, you may be able to keep in touch and cultivate the interest further. Lastly, and of utmost importance, even if the return visit is brief, share a scriptural thought. The spiritual content of our conversation is what makes our visit different from any others that they may have. Do they have neighbors, friends, workmates, or relatives that check in on them? But for them to grow spiritually, the water of truth from God's Word must be dispensed. See, conveying just a brief scriptural thought may provide just enough to keep their spiritual soil moist.
That's the last we'll hear from Gary today, and instead we'll move on to the next speaker who's going to tell us how to double down on brainwashing with a potential convert.
Basic Bible teachings are wonderful. Usually, it's the fundamental doctrines of the Bible, basic teachings, that draw people to the truth. However, learning basic Bible teachings is just the beginning of knowledge about Jehovah. Must learn to love God and His standards and appreciate that all of His ways and requirements are expressions of His love for us. When Bible students experience the good that comes from obeying Jehovah and following His ways, their love for Him will deepen.
So, as people study with Jehovah's Witnesses, they're expected to start obeying Jehovah's standards, aka whatever Toni Morris and the boys interpret Jehovah's standards to be like. And it's up to the Jehovah's Witness to use soft pressure to enforce that change, as we'll see in the dramatization.
Mrs. Iwata was doing great. We were already on lesson 10. I really hope she'd come to a meeting soon. We talked about Hebrews 10, 24 and 25, and watched the video. Did I miss something? I guess I did. I was too focused on our progress with the lessons instead of her progress and what she needed.
Oh no, the sister here focused too much on the material and ended up forcing the meetings too much. How will Mrs. Iwata go to the meetings now?
Mr. Iwata said going to meetings would dishonor the family. He wanted her to quit the study. She didn't want to quit, but whenever she tried to talk about it, they argued. We showed her where to look for help and made time during our studies to talk about it more. And we all prayed for Jehovah to bless her efforts. We did our best to share the good news of peace. And Jehovah did the rest.
Okay, so her husband is like, don't go to the meetings. And what Jehovah's Witnesses are here instructed to do is to figure out a way to bridge that gap. In this clearly delusional case, Mrs. Iwata just happens to find the perfect article on JW.org, and then she shows up at the meeting. How did she actually resolve the issue? Don't think about it. Doesn't she look nice in her already JW-approved attire?
Help your students to see how their obedience and exclusive devotion to Jehovah pave the way to friendship with Him. We show our trust in Jehovah by doing what He tells us to do, and thereby we become His friends. Jehovah takes good care of His friends, and He is always loyal to them.
So remember, Jehovah's Witnesses, teach your imaginary students that you will statistically never find that if they want to be Jehovah's friend, they gotta follow the rules. But at least Will has a couple of practical tips to help the manipulation process go more smoothly.
So when you show your student the video, What Happens at a Kingdom Hall, that would be a good time to warmly invite him to attend meetings. Also, be sure to invite a variety of publishers to accompany you on the study. In that way, your student will get acquainted with others in the congregation, and he will likely feel more at home when he attends our meetings.
We'll take a little break from William for now, because the symposium is finally over, and Mark Sanderson is here to tell young Jehovah's Witnesses that there's no better life than one spent working for free in his organization.
An 18-year-old brother was trying to decide what he wanted to do after high school. He was raised in the truth, and in his heart, he wanted to be a pioneer. But he also had a scholarship to go to university and some other grants, and he had been accepted to attend. He had many questions. How was he going to support himself? And much pressure from his teachers and counselors to go to university. What decision would he make? Well, maybe many of you young ones who are listening to this talk right now are facing that same decision, or maybe you will be in a year or two. What path will you take?
Yeah, that 18-year-old he just mentioned, that's him. That's how predictable this is. At the end, he's going to be like, still have doubts? Well, that 18-year-old was me, and look at me now with a brand new iPhone, never been married, leading a cult. Don't focus so much on the never been married part. If it worked for me, it worked for you, it will work for you in the future. The whole thing just feels like a lottery winner telling you to buy lottery tickets because, hey, it worked out for him.
Well, many young people have found real joy and peace by choosing a career in the full-time service. But now, when we say full-time service, what are we talking about? Well, full-time service is not just one thing. It actually includes many things. It includes pioneering, maybe in your home congregation, or maybe in another area, maybe in another city, state, province, even in another country. It might mean assisting with theocratic construction projects, maybe building kingdom halls or assembly halls, or building remote translation offices, or even working at Bethel facilities. And it also could mean submitting an application for Bethel service and becoming a Bethelite.
Yes, there are many ways you can work for free for the cult. And Mark Sanderson is about to answer the question we are all asking.
But now here's a question. What challenges could prevent you from starting or continuing on the path of full-time service? And more importantly, how can you overcome those challenges? Well, let's talk about 3 obstacles. Here's the first one. It's financial concerns. How am I going to support myself? Well, let's look at something that Jesus said. Keep on then seeking first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these other things will be added to you. Jesus was trying to reason that just as Jehovah provides for all of his creation, he can provide for you too. We just need to develop our faith that Jehovah will provide the things we need if we put his service first.
So if you were worried about how you would maintain yourself while working for free full time, then you need to work on having more faith. Luckily, that's not all you should do though.
So it's very wise when you're young to plan ahead so that you can obtain the skills you need to be able to support yourself. Now, in some lands, it may be that as you're growing up, you can learn a trade from your father or from your mother or maybe even from another relative. In other lands, you might be able, while you're still in high school, to take some vocational courses that would help you to learn a skill or learn a trade.
Mark is especially good at manipulation in general, knowing which parts to say out loud and which parts to remain silent about. Here, he doesn't need to remind Jehovah's Witnesses that they're not supposed to go to higher education. Instead, he reminds them of what they are allowed to do, which is learning a trade from your parents or in high school. Jehovah's Witnesses get the encoded message, and any unsuspected listener will not find anything wrong with what Mark just said. Although this is a common Jehovah's Witness manipulation technique, Mark is one of the best speakers at using it. He'll continue to try and manipulate Jehovah's Witnesses by using another common technique, telling them exactly what they want and what to say to defend it.
Here's the second obstacle: pressure from others. My relatives want me to focus on making money. Well, if that's the case, explain your spiritual goals in a calm, respectful way. Colossians chapter 4 and verse 6 says, "Let your words always be gracious, seasoned with salt." Well, we all know when we eat food with no salt, it doesn't taste very good, does it? You put a little salt on it, now it becomes delicious. So make sure that when you speak to your relatives, you put a little salt on those words so that you can reason with them and help them to see the wisdom of the decision that you want to make. Well, now what's the point? Well, sometimes when people make a decision, we're not sure if it was the right one or not. But when the decision works out well, when it leads to success, when people see how happy you are and how successful you are, the joy, the satisfaction you have, well then, what happens? Well, maybe your relatives will see that your decision has been vindicated. It's been proved righteous by the way things have turned out.
So if anyone tells you as a young person that this isn't the best way to live your life, you calmly explain to them that you don't care. And then you put on a happy face to prove them wrong. And if you think I'm being unfair here because Mark probably meant that the work that Jehovah's Witnesses are expected to do will be pleasurable and fill them with joy, just listen to obstacle number 3.
Here's obstacle number 3. Unexpected challenges. I thought it was going to be easier than this. Well, those unexpected challenges can be many. It could be just trying to get used to new roommates, dealing with personality challenges, or even just coping with homesickness. Here's the point. Don't give up. Well, have you ever heard the expression, no pain, no gain? Well, if you want to reach a certain fitness goal, or if you want to be very good at playing a certain sport, no doubt you're going to have some achy muscles. And no doubt you're going to have some hurt pride along the way too. Maybe you won't be very good when you first start. But what do? If you want to become good, if you want to reach your goal, you can't give up. You have to keep trying. Well, the same could be said about reaching our spiritual goals. So when those trials come, and they will come, don't look for a quick way out. Endure. Keep going. Don't give up. Seek advice from brothers and sisters who have successfully coped with similar challenges, and you too will be successful.
Mark knows that young Jehovah's Witnesses will be disheartened if they decide to become full-time servants. He knows that it's not only likely, but inevitable. And his answer, as customary, is double down and put your shin up to do more. And like apparently everyone else, he brought in a video to reinforce what he has just said. We won't go through it though. This is just indoctrination victims realizing how hard becoming a Jehovah's Witness is and how they double down on their beliefs. Instead, let's skip that and see how Mark talks yet again of how to prepare for when your family inevitably tells you dedicating your life to a cult is a bad idea.
Brothers and sisters, why are we so convinced that full-time service will lead you young ones to a wonderful life? Well, it's because that's the decision that so many of us made when we were young. Do you remember that 18-year-old young brother who was trying to decide which path to take? Well, that was me some years ago.
What a surprise.
I'm so glad that with the help of Jehovah and my parents and other mature friends in the congregation, I made the decision, just like so many other brothers and sisters around the world, to turn down that scholarship, to give up university, and go directly into the full-time service. That is a decision that I have never regretted. That is a decision that I will never regret.
Well, never say never. Unfortunately, this is where Mark's segment ends and where we go back to William, probably because they didn't plan this very well. And we get into this video segment that shows actual candid interviews with Jehovah's Witnesses who have faced hard times. This is how Will introduces it.
As long as we live in Satan's world, all of us will face situations that can rob us of our peace. The governing body knows that many of you are suffering circumstances not unlike the ones we will hear about. And they trust that the examples in this video will help each of you to maintain your peace as you endure various trials.
So when I was watching this, I thought that this was a welcome departure of their usual format of boring speeches with dumb dramas spread all throughout. But then I realized the truth. And here is where I'd like to take a quick break to tell you how I wanted to talk about conventions and how this video broke it. I wanted to talk about conventions, not to rebut them, but just to provide enough commentary to make an enjoyable and funny summary of what Jehovah's Witnesses are watching in their conventions. I don't like when channels use continuous outrage to keep viewers entertained or engaged. I want to avoid that, and instead I just wanted to use humor. I thought we could all just join together and just cringe at the convention. But then I watched this video.
Brothers and sisters all over the world are facing natural disasters, economic collapse, illness, persecution. Despite all that, they keep joy and peace. I can learn a lot from them.
So the video starts narrated by this brave and beautiful little girl, and already you can tell she is a better, more engaging speaker than every single other speaker we've ever heard before her. She's the reason why we can't avoid the outrage, but we'll get back to her. This is the start of a video segment that interweaves 5 different stories from the 5 different people we just saw. Now, to maximize engagement and sentimentality, the video goes for well over half an hour, first going through each person, introducing them, and then going through each one of their challenges and so forth, and throughout showing establishing shots with sad violin music. We're not going to do that, and instead, I'm just going to skip the melodrama to tell you what happened to each of them.
In 2017, I was the treasurer for a prestigious bank in Nicaragua, and I was the father of a 1-year-old son. We were very happy. But then I lost my job. So I said, I have the experience, and Jehovah will help me find another job. Something similar. And I kept looking for jobs, but doors kept closing. I felt very tense. It made me feel very useless. Like, I can't even provide for my family. It was something very difficult for me.
This is getting boring. This guy struggled with money for a while, then decided to bake bread and iron clothes for money for a while, and now he has a good job. Great. How insightful. Then we move on to this old lady who was affected by the California fires.
Well, here in California, we're used to fires. But when I got the call to evacuate that morning, I never knew by that evening the whole town of Paradise would be gone. Just before the fire, we had the needs of the congregation where they instructed us of what to do in the case of a disaster. I had the truck full of gas, I had my go bag ready, and I had a map of where I was going. I was ready. The brothers also in their instructions said to obey the traffic instructors. The instructor told us to turn right, and I didn't want to turn right, but they said obey them, so I turned right, though I thought it'd be really bad.
But guess what? It was fine, and then she stays over with some Jehovah's Witnesses while her house was rebuilt. She does say something interesting, though.
I realized that I was going to die. I asked Jehovah if he saw enough good in me, if he would just resurrect me, that I'd love to be in his new world and see my husband again and my children. And I thanked him so much for the life that I had. And I felt such a peace that I'd never felt before.
I just find it heartbreaking that even this nice and poor old lady who has dedicated her life to her religion can't be sure of whether she's done enough for Jehovah to resurrect her. Then we move on to the third interview, and this one pleasantly surprised me. We get to meet Nikki Williams, an amazing nurse who has struggled with depression and who did heroic work during the pandemic.
I was feeling so sad. I really needed Jehovah's help to figure out what was going on with me. And I remember the 2009 article about depression came out. And I realized, okay, Jehovah, you're telling me this is what I have. So now that I realize I have this, I got to figure out how I can manage it. So I changed my eating habits. I started exercising a lot more. I realized that exercising and eating healthy really, really did help. Also, I made a journal and I made different sections of the different aspects of my depression that I dealt with. Each section, I would put scriptures, I would put articles, and the illustrations, the pictures. They speak a lot without saying anything. Jehovah hears us. Jehovah cares.
Look, I could obviously point out how Nikki here is equating what the magazines say with what Jehovah says, but honestly, as someone who struggles with depression and other mental health issues, this isn't terrible advice. This clearly helped Nikki get through her issues. And hey, if that helped her, then good for her, I guess. And if you're thinking, well, sure, but she should have gone to the doctor, well...
So I decided, you know what, I'm gonna ask for a shepherding call with my brothers because I never talked about my depression with the elders at all. This was my first time speaking with them. And there was one brother, one of the elders, who also battled depression. And he suggested, have you thought about seeking medical help? Seeking professional help was something I never wanted to do. I thought that I didn't need to do it. But sometimes there comes a point where you need additional help. And what you're doing is not enough. In this world, they make you feel like it's a bad thing, that depression is a dirty word, or seeking medical help is something that you don't do. But I realized also that seeking medical help, was part of my being able to worship Jehovah effectively. That's me doing my part. Not everyone needs to take that step, but for me, this is what I need to do. And I'm glad I did it, because the fact that I've never ever felt this good in my life.
Again, I could focus on how she had to go through the elders to get to the medical help, but hey, again, this is great advice. For the very first time since pretty much ever, Jehovah's Witnesses are being told that seeking out psychiatric help is an option, and even had a Bible verse to back it up. I give a lot of shit to Watchtower because they usually do things terribly, terribly wrong. But in this very specific case, I gotta say, they improved for the best. There's nothing negative I want to say here. Nikki is a hero, and she's saving lives in and out of their religion, and I hope she's doing great. Have I fooled you into thinking this is going to be a pleasant segment yet?
In my childhood, I played an unusual game. I would catch insects, put them in a jar, and then bring them home. Then, I would get books, such as a criminal procedural code, open them up and start judging one of the bugs. I would play the role of investigator and judge at the same time. And then, the persecution started with Brother Christensen, and then there was a ripple effect of arrests, one after the other. Then it was our turn. In June of 2018, a huge group of armed men came to us, to our home. They represented the ideals of my childhood. But now these people, this judicial system, became the source of injustice to me. I was sitting in a cage, the same way my bugs used to be in a jar. I guess I felt like they did. In your head, at that moment when you hear the verdict that you'll stay in prison, it's like you've been knocked unconscious. You've been hit in the head with something, and there's just a ringing sound in your ears. And so I was taken away in handcuffs.
Here we get to meet Felix, who was incarcerated by the Russian regime because of his beliefs. This is why incarcerating people for what they believe is terrible. Not only because it's inhumane, not only because it's ineffective, but because it just ends up reinforcing the beliefs of the indoctrinated, as they never struggle to find miracles in anything.
These people, they made life uncomfortable, unbearable. But when they were treated kindly, they started to soften. They began to treat me differently. When I was being transferred out of that cell, the inmate that ran the area called me over to him and said, "Come sit beside me." And I sat down. Then he said, "If anybody in this prison touches you, tell him that I'll come looking for him." Then he said, "Get his things." He told the other prisoners. The cell doors opened, and the guards saw a crowd of inmates grabbing my things and putting them out into the hallway. I left the cell without having to carry a thing. The guard quietly closed the door, and before the inmates returned to their cells, they even said goodbye, hugged me and said, "Hang in there, you're gonna be okay." They went into the cell, and the guard closed the door and asked me, "Boy, how long have you been in there?" I said, 3 weeks. He said, "Well, normally people leave this cell beaten up, and they're thrown out by the other inmates. They have to carry their own things, and that's if the other inmates haven't thrown their stuff out the door." He couldn't believe what had just happened. That's Jehovah.
No, that's not Jehovah. The inmates clearly realized that this nice and inoffensive man did not belong in prison, and treated him nicely in exchange. This is only a miracle if you're instructed to believe that people outside their religion can be kind or fair. So anytime that's not the case, they can claim divine intervention instead of admitting that, hey, people in the world can be nice people too. And that unfortunately leaves us to the last person we're going to talk about, the little girl at the beginning. At this point, I'd like to give you a trigger warning. If you're triggered by issues like death and children with cancer and cults draining people of their life, regardless of how short it might be, you may just want to skip to the next part of the video. There are time codes below. Not really gonna crack jokes or anything. If you're here, let's just watch it.
My name is Antoinette. I live here in Las Vegas, Nevada with my super mom and my troublemaking sister. Family and friends have always been important to me. As a child, I lived with my mom and dad, and I was very close to my dad's side of the family. It was very loving, unified, and fun. I was pretty happy, but I already was starting to feel the effects of my cancer. We just didn't know what it was, really. One day I was okay, and then the next day I started feeling bad, you know. As a little kid, I always wanted, like, one big happy family. Once we moved to New York for my treatment, I no longer had that big family bond anymore. What I was feeling back then in New York was just sadness. Never really peace.
So Antoinette is a beautiful little person who had to move to New York for her cancer treatment. And initially, it was pretty lonely. Luckily, she found a friend in the congregation to take her to the appointments and make her feel better. She even has her hair back and everything, so at this point, you may even think this is a happy story.
When they told me about my cancer being gone, I was really happy. I was ecstatic. I was like, finally, I'm going to get to do normal things that a kid my age should be able to do. I don't need to be afraid or anxious anymore. Unfortunately, I did relapse again. And basically right now, my present condition is there's nothing really more to do. They're just waiting to let nature take its course, basically. And that's it. In harmony with Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26, I had to let myself process the news and let myself be sad, angry. Let yourself feel those feelings. Do not try to repress them.
So yeah, this little girl is dying of cancer. I was able to find a GoFundMe page for Antoinette where they actually received so much more in donations than what they asked, that Antoinette's mother updated people asking them to donate to ExJW.org instead. And from this, I can gather that Antoinette is still with us and still fighting cancer. And I obviously wish her nothing but the best. I hope she's happy. I hope she makes it. And I hope showing up at the convention is as much of a dream come true for her as it would have been for me at her age. That being said, after watching this, I kind of broke down. I had to stop watching the convention for the day and take a walk because I can't believe the lengths that this cult is willing to go to use up people for their advantage. They could have easily donated as much as they have collected from anonymous people around the world. They could have helped. But instead of helping, they have the audacity of using this little girl to get traffic and reinforce indoctrination. And it's not enough to share her story so their religion can distract followers with the feels so they don't see the cult they're in. No, she has to do more for the cult in the video.
But you can control your thoughts and your actions. Pretty much my whole life, it has revolved around my illness, but I learned how to shift focus. I just don't focus on myself all the time. I focus on others, their trials that are different, but just as hard. you read the stories on JW.org in the newsroom. The Russian brothers and sisters, I pray for them constantly because they're going through a very tough time.
That's right. Antoinette prayed for the brothers who are imprisoned in Russia, and if this forced segue doesn't tell you where this is going, then you don't know what Jehovah's Witnesses are capable of.
Hello.
Hello.
Antoinette, when I was told that we would talk with each other, this was something very special for me.
Same for me too. When the brothers told me as well that I was meeting you, I was really excited.
Thank you for your prayers in behalf of the brothers in Russia. They are precious. We can learn so much from you.
So they organized a video call so Antoinette can call Felix and we can all make it about persecution to get this tear-jerking moment.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
It's nice meeting you.
Goodbye.
The whole 40-minute segment revolves around Antoinette, her struggle, and how she has remained an active and exemplary Jehovah's Witness all this time, so why can't you? And they are surprisingly not done exploiting this situation. You see, women in the congregation cannot teach, right? They can't give speeches. They can't even pass around the microphones because they're to be quiet. They're to be submissive. But Antoinette is so compelling as a person that they bend the rules. So it's her voice that introduces and concludes this segment. Because Jehovah's Witnesses know this is the best way to get an emotional reaction.
My cancer is uncurable, but I know the cure is in the new system, so that's the cure. I like to imagine when that time happens, what will I be doing? Obviously, I'm going to be jumping for joy because I'm going to be rid of my cancer. I'm going to enjoy food that we never really got to enjoy. And I'm going to have so many animals. I'm going to make a house. I'm going to learn how to make a house. Peace in this world is not the absence of illness, danger, persecution, or economic problems. Peace in this world is listening to Jehovah's guidance, praying to Jehovah constantly, meditating on Jehovah's word and his promises. Peace in this world is also having good friends by our side, or having a good sense of humor.
What I've learned from all of this is peace isn't from what's outside, from what's going on, or what you're experiencing. I've learned that peace is on the inside, and that comes from Jehovah.
So yeah, after this very depressing bit, let's just see how William Malenfant concludes this disgusting segment, letting you know how you shouldn't worry about trials, but hey, they're coming for you, so just FYI.
If you are experiencing trials, focus on what you can control. Help others. Be grateful and rely on Jehovah and his organization. If you are not experiencing serious trials, do what you can to prepare for them by building yourself up spiritually. Do not be anxious. Fear of what might happen is often worse than the trial itself. Trust in Jehovah and be assured that he will never abandon his friends.
There you go, we got through it together. There's no more triggering stuff, I hope. And instead we only have one speech, the baptism speech, which is pretty boring.
We cannot express to you baptism candidates around the world how much of a privilege it is for us to share in this occasion with you. You are following through on the most important decision you've ever made, to make it known publicly that you have dedicated your life to God.
I'm gonna cut out a whole bunch of this speech away because, otherwise you'd just be watching this. And instead, I'm just gonna remind you that the baptism speech is done for the people who are ready to become fully fledged Jehovah's Witnesses, and they listen to this speech right before changing into usually white t-shirts and shorts to get submerged into a pool or other body of water for the occasion. This is significant because once you're baptized, you're eligible for a multitude of tasks that benefit the religion, which allows you to show that you're more involved into the cult. And that is the only way to acquire status among Jehovah's Witnesses. But baptizing also means you're subject to disfellowshipping, where everyone in the cult, including friends and family, are told to shun you. This means that Antoinette from earlier, who is already a baptized Jehovah's Witness, can be disfellowshipped and subject to be shunned. Weirdly enough, they always seem to forget to bring that up in the baptism talk. And as I told you before, this baptism talk is pretty boring. That being said, we all know it's not a Jehovah's Witness talk without some real culty talk.
We must also continue to be made new in our dominant mental attitude. This involves our thoughts, what we allow our mind to dwell on. Our goal as baptized servants of Jehovah is to gain a dominant mental attitude that aligns and is in harmony with God's thoughts. Now, that won't always be easy. It takes time and a lot of effort.
I believe this speech really illustrates the desperation of the governing body, since the whole thing is really a plea to newcomers to please never, ever stop being a Jehovah's Witness, as we're about to see.
As we go through our discussion today, we're going to answer 3 questions. First, why is it important that we do not give up on walking in Jehovah's way of peace? Second, how does walking in Jehovah's way bring us peace? And third, what can we do to continue walking in Jehovah's way of peace? Well, let's address our first question. Why is it important that we do not give up in walking in Jehovah's way of peace? It's because being one of Jehovah's Witnesses requires that we remain active and persevere in the way of peace. You, dear candidates, have not given up in your efforts to please Jehovah and to qualify to become part of His people. And why is that? It's because of your love for Him. And you know that any trials and obstacles you face now are momentary and light when compared to an eternity in God's new world.
The first point's really simple. Don't give up, because if you do, you'll lose your life in paradise. But now, he'll interview a lady who got baptized at the age of 15, despite her own mother's wishes.
But to highlight how this can be done, at this time, we're pleased to introduce Sister Indira Alfonso. Sister Alfonso was baptized in 2006 and now serves with her husband as Bethel family members in Warwick. Sister Alfonso, can you tell us a little about your journey, how you became associated with Jehovah's Witnesses?
Yes, I was born in Cuba, but my mom and I moved to the United States when I was 9. Even though I was young, I felt it was important to look for God. So whenever we moved, I would visit the local churches in the area, even getting baptized in a number of them. When I was 11, my mom let me move in with my aunt, who was one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And from there, she asked my mom if I could study with a pioneer sister from her congregation, and my mom agreed.
So when she's 11, Sister Alfonso decides to join the Jehovah's Witnesses. The mom is okay until she realizes what Jehovah's Witnesses can do, but by then, it's already too late. As even at that young age, the indoctrination has already taken roots to the point of being more important to her than her own mother.
I made changes very quickly. I stopped celebrating holidays, stopped praying to idols, but these changes were very strange to my mom, just difficult for her to understand. She really was afraid I was being brainwashed. So after studying for several months, she had me move back in with her, which meant the end of my studies and no more attending meetings. It wasn't long before my association was affecting my speech and my behavior. I found myself easily influenced to even celebrate my birthday again. I could feel I was moving further away from Jehovah instead of closer to him.
I'm sorry to hear that, Sister Alfonso.
I realized that a peaceful relationship with Jehovah might mean no peace with my family. But I knew that if I were to ever gain my mom, I had to walk with Jehovah the right way and not give up. So one night I prayed to him, crying for forgiveness and asking for his help. And to my surprise, a few days later, without any explanation, my mom had me move back in with my aunt. So I resumed my Bible studies. And a year later, at the age of 15, I got baptized. A good friend helped me to adjust the way I was communicating with my mom. So one day I called her and expressed to her how much I truly appreciate and love her. I didn't want us to be distant anymore. I explained to her that my love for her had never changed, but my love for Jehovah had come first. So that conversation was a turning point for us. Now we have had many positive discussions, and she's much more understanding of my decision. Seeing Jehovah's guidance in my life makes me determined to continue walking in his way of peace.
Fortunately, she has been able to repair her relationship with her mom somewhat, but as she just told us, that was never a priority. It's not hard to see how terrifyingly strong the indoctrination can be, especially to young minds.
Well, let's address our second point. How does walking in Jehovah's way bring us peace? The reality is that you will face challenges and tests of your faith. The devil will make sure of it. He will make sure that you are confronted with temptations. You can be successful and avoid danger if you remain within the boundaries of Jehovah's way of peace. Now, how do you stay within those boundaries? By continuing to learn about Jehovah's laws and principles and obeying them. That obedience will not only protect you, but it will give you inner peace, peace that comes from having a clean conscience.
It's worth talking about the temptations that these baptism candidates are guaranteed to face, apparently. These include getting extra hours to make ends meet at the cost of missing meetings, being interested in a sexual relationship with someone who's not under a marriage contract with you, study to get better job prospects, or even reading what those pesky apostates say about literally any topic ever. No wonder keeping a clean conscience takes so much effort. And you also have to put the effort on getting on the hamster wheel and never stopping.
Being on Jehovah's way of peace allows you to move forward, to make continual spiritual progress. So one way to advance spiritually is to look for ways to do good things for others, both inside and outside the congregation. And as a witness of Jehovah, our journey, our walk on this figurative road will lead us to our destination, the goal of enjoying a peaceful friendship with God forever.
As we can see, most of this speech is just different ways of promising baptism candidates that, if they follow the rules, Jehovah will bless them somehow or something. But now we have a second interview, and we're interviewing Mrs. Samuel Hurd's wife herself.
How have you managed to enjoy greater inner peace?
I learned, Brother Turner, that if Jehovah gives you an assignment, he will give you what you need to fulfill it. We learned and really benefited from the traveling overseers and their wives. It was such a privilege to serve along with these faithful brothers and sisters, and several of them had served me and my family when I was very young. So to see their faithfulness, to see their happiness, and to see that they really had inner peace really benefited me. I learned from that, and I wanted to follow their example.
That help from others can be so valuable.
So what helped Sister Herd to have peace was to see that others had peace. Well, that's convenient and nowhere in the Bible. But then she tells us the weirdest story.
This happened very often, but one time we moved in with a sister on Tuesday morning, and something I said upset her very much. She got very angry. Well, I decided not to pursue the issue because I had to live with her for a week. And I just decided to let her see by my conduct that I could never have meant what she thought. So as the week went by, the days went by, the tension lessened, and by Monday, when we left, we were the best of friends, and she gave me a big hug, and nothing more was said about the subject.
Well, sounds like you handled that beautifully, Sister Herd. Your spiritual qualities were evident.
So Sister Herd offended someone, and instead of talking about it directly on day one, she just hoped the sister realized it was a mistake. Good thing it worked out, I guess? Let's just conclude the baptism talk with some more thought control.
Well, let's now address our final point. What can we do to continue walking in Jehovah's way of peace? Well, right now, we need to be and stay on this road to life. So we want to make sure that any needed adjustments are made in our thoughts and our actions so that we're not confined or restricted in making spiritual progress. So in order to rejoice, can you make it a goal to focus on things that bring joy rather than sadness? So if you're not feeling well or coping with chronic pain, you can focus on God's promise when no one will say, I am sick. If you're facing beliefs or opposition for your beliefs, focus on the fact that we're part of a brotherhood that supports and prays for us, and arrangements are in place to keep us spiritually strong. If you're discouraged by world events, you can rejoice in the fact that you have a hope for the future. And we know how this all ends. We know that better times are ahead.
Yes, if you have any issue as a Jehovah's Witness, just think about something else. But we're not done with thought control.
You will never regret the decision you have made to dedicate your life to Jehovah. First, do not give up on walking in Jehovah's way of peace. Your life depends on it. Allow Jehovah to guide your steps. Second, stay within the boundaries on the road to life. Remember, you're walking with a purpose, and that will lead you to your destination. Peaceful friendship with Jehovah forever. And finally, keep making any needed adjustments in your thoughts, your attitude, and actions so that you can maintain peace with Jehovah and peace with others.
And this just finishes proving how the Jehovah's Witnesses leadership is afraid of losing converts. Nowadays, when waking up is a Google lookup away, you'll only keep followers indoctrinated if you make them afraid of even thinking to look for a way out. And that's how this convention concludes. We had a marvelous spiritual banquet where we saw an Asian lady threading some flowers. We got Mark Sanderson looking for young people. And we got to see one of the most disgusting things Jehovah's Witnesses have made, which, was a lot of fun. This convention is really hard to summarize because it feels like they're losing touch more and more, and they just say the most outrageous things without even flinching. But hey, that's why we cringe. If you like what I do and want to support me, please do at the Patreon link below, like this lovely people right here. Don't forget to subscribe to watch the following CRINGEATHON, the Saturday PM program. I also have a podcast with my friends Dax and my little Pimo called Babble on the Grade that comes out roughly twice a month, and it should come on YouTube very soon. I'm still working on that. I have a ton of things to do, but thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.